Greetings, fellow Slayers. While I look at Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 3, now continues on with Doppelgängland. In a local crypt, Anya, who is now a mortal human being, begs the demon Dehofrin, her former boss, to create a temporal fold to allow her to go back and retrieve the necklace that was her power center. The demon denies her request, and Anya vows to get the amulet back with or without his help. At school, Willow practices floating a pencil while Buffy does sit-ups in preparation for Slayer testing. When Buffy mentions Faith, Willow loses her emotional control and the pencil goes flying into a tree. Principal Snyder orders Willow to tutor one of the school's basketball players, Percy West, in history, despite her protests. Later at the library, Joss asks Willow to make another attempt to break into the mayor's files. Faith and Wesley come in after training on the obstacle field, and Faith finds out about Willow searching through the mayor's files and informs him of it. The mayor presents Faith with a brand new, fully furnished apartment and tells her that he has plans to have some vampires kill Willow who make a look at a random attack. He plans on getting her out of the way so she is unable to access his computer. Back at school, Austin meets up with Willow and informs her about a gig Dingo Zay My Baby had the other night. When Willow confronts Percy about tutoring him, he gives his own interpretation of events. That she has to do his work for him. Buffy and Xander pick the wrong moment to ask Willow to record a TV show for them the other night. Willow, offended being labeled old reliable, storms away, threatening to do something irresponsible. Change your look, cut class, or eat a snack between meals. Okay then. Anya finds Willow and asks to help her with a spell, some dark magic. Willow, eager to do something shocking and unreliable, agrees. The spell involves chicken feet and the ritual pouring sand over the representation of the object desired to be pulled out of the alternate dimension. Anya and Willow set up the spell in an empty classroom. Ronnie explains the spell's mechanics. They will offer a plea to higher deity and pour sand over the representation of the lost object in hopes of creating a temporal fold and retrieving Anya's necklace. The two girls chant to cast a spell. However, Willow is given psychic flashes of the alternate world and causes sand to spill on her hands. As the spell ends, the alternate vampire Willow vanishes before Oz is able to stake her. Willow is unsettled by the spell and leaves as Anya vents her frustration at the spell not working and Willow's hesitation. Elsewhere, Vampire Willow appears in an abandoned warehouse, unsure of where she is. Vampire Willow walks through Sunnydale, clearing resorts in a world where humans freely walk the streets at night. She enters the Bronze, where she encounters Percy, who doesn't realize it's someone else. Vampire Willow finds Percy's threats boring and tosses him across the pool table, intent on killing him. Xander breaks up the fight, and Vampire Willow recognizes him, only to be disappointed that he is actually alive. Buffy is surprised by Willow's new leather thing, and is even more shocked when Willow snarls at her with vampire face. As Buffy and Xander watch her, heartbroken, Vampire Willow leaves the Bronze and is attacked by two minions of the mayor, sent to kill the human Willow. She easily defeats and tortures them until they agree to work for her. Her plan is to change this Sunnydale into the one she is used to. Buffy and Xander return to the library and tells Joss the upsetting news that Willow is dead. The three sit mournfully recalling their friendship with her until the actual Willow shows up, ironically asking if someone was dead. Xander tries to chase her away with a cross, and Willow merely looks puzzled, not affected by the item at all. Recognizing this Willow is not a vampire, her friends simultaneously fold her in a crushing embrace. Aww. Meanwhile, at the Bronze, Anya tries to get a beer at the bar, claiming she's 1,120 years old. The bartender, unfazed by her claim, refuses, so she sells for a Coke. Angel shows up looking for Buffy. Vampire Willow and her new minions appear, taking control of the Bronze. Angel leaves to get Buffy, and Alice watches in shock as Vampire Willow kills the girl. Anya, recognizing what has happened, approaches Vampire Willow with the idea of restoring her to her own world and Anya's amulet to herself. Angel goes to the library and notices that Willow is dead before noticing Willow standing there. They all head for the Bronze, but Willow turns back against something and is caught by Vampire Willow. The two banter back and forth until Willow finally shoots her evil double when Giles strangles the guy and locks her up in the library cage. Willow ponders her where it is to be with her double and how completely opposite she is from herself. Buffy reassures her that there's no similarity between a person and the demon they become when they've been turned into a vampire. Angel starts to object that that's not true, but quickly silences himself. At Buffy's suggestion, Willow swaps clothes with her sleeping double. Uncomfortable in the tight leather attire, Willow does her best to pose as vampire while the rest of the Scooby Gang wait outside the bronze. Cordelia arrives at the library and finds Vampire Willow wearing Willow's fuzzy pink sweater, locked in the cage. Before releasing Willow, Cordelia takes the opportunity to lecture her on the ethics of boyfriend stealing. She psychoanalyzes her relationship with Xander, saying part of their relationship was the constant danger. Born of her mind, Vampire Willow humors Cordelia in order to get her to shut up. It works, and Cordelia lets her out. Vampire Willow shows her vampire face and pursues Cordelia, recording her in her restroom. Wesley, hearing Cordelia scream, intervenes and forces Vampire Willow to depart. Cordelia hugs him and asks what he's doing that night. Willow tries to get as many vampires as possible to go outside the bronze, but they collect them off one by one. She also surreptitiously signals to Oz that she's herself and not a vampire. Unpersuaded by Willow's unconvincing act to the bronze, Anya points out to the Willow's vampire minions that their leader is a fake. Willow screams, stealing Buffy, Angel, and Giles to enter. As they fight the vampires, Willow retreats to the stage with Oz. Vampire Willow then returns, throws Oz out of the way and starts choking Willow. Buffy stops her from choking Willow and is just about to take the vampire. Willow shouts for her not to kill her. Buffy manages to stop just in time. When Vampire Willow is pulled back, she states that this world is no fun, and Willow agrees with her. Despite fully knowing what her evil doppelganger is capable of, Willow cannot bear to have her staked. She convinces the others to send her back, arguing that Vampire Willow should have the chance to survive in her own world, a suggestion which the doppelganger accepts. With Anya's resentful help, Vampire Willow is returned to her world. She is transported back to the middle of the brawl in the factory. She has just enough time to smile at being returned to reality before Oz grabs her and shoves her against a protruding piece of wood from the human's cage, just like before. Vampire Willow has just enough time to snarl, "Oh, fuh," before she turns to dust. The next day, Buffy asks Willow if she'd like to go out that night, but her experience with her vampire double has made her feel like staying in and doing homework and flossing and dying a virgin in order to make up for the double guilt coupons. Vampire Willow has accumulated, but then Percy shows up, and before Willow can apologize for not doing his work, he starts treating her with great respect. He presents her with papers on both President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and President Theodore Roosevelt. He wasn't sure which one the report was supposed to be on, and he didn't feel like risking Willow's wrath again. He's even prepared her bibliography and shyly presents her with an apple. Willow, now seeing that perhaps there's something to be said for a little advice, agrees to go out for the evening. Aww. So now let's take a look at some continuity with this episode. This episode marks the first appearance of D'Hoffryn, Anya's boss as a vengeance demon. She'll attempt to find D'Hoffryn, calling him in a crypt in something blue. When Willow becomes angry over Buffy's mention of faith, she loses emotional control and causes the pencil she's levitating to propel itself into a tree. She uses a pencil in similar fashion to stake a vampire in the episode Choices. Snyder references the events of Go Fish when he wanted Willow to unfairly pass a lazy jog, Gage Petronzi, because of his importance to Sunnydale High swim team, which claims this episode was a debacle, considering further best players became monsters. Faith moves into an apartment of her own, leaving her bedroom at Sunnydale Motor Inn. Willow and Anya first meet, marking the beginning of their mutual dislike, which will be explored in Triangle. Vampire Willow walks down Sunnydale's main street, finding it full of happy people, and a shot-for-shot recreation of Cordelia walking through the same area in The Wish. However, Cordelia's experience is the direct opposite of Vampire Willow's, which encapsulates the difference made by Buffy's appearance in Sunnydale. This is especially relevant in Gingerbread, which raises questions whether or not Buffy really does any good by being the Slayer. A few years later, Willow's magical corrupted persona will repeat Vampire Willow's phrase, "bored now," before getting wearing mirrors and villains. Percy will eventually mention the time that Vampire Willow attacked him, starting where he was in his Realities Willow in Graduation Day Part 1. Vampire Willow is surprised that Xander isn't dead, as he had been staked in her reality just before she left it, as seen in The Wish. She's then surprised he isn't undead, as his alternative counterpart was a vampire like her. Sandy, the woman Vampire Willow bites in the bronze, will appear again as a vampire family, and then again in Shadow, where she ultimately meets her end. Willow comments that her vampire self seems kind of gay. Meg remarks that vampires and their human counterparts are nothing alike, but Angel begins to correct this matter before letting Angel begins to direct this before letting the matter go. This foreshadows Willow's homosexuality, revealed in New Moon Rising. Buffy is able to react, not seeing a vampire Willow as soon as Willow tells her to stop. In contrast to when Faith accidentally killed Alan Finch in Bad Girls while Buffy warned her. Despite Willow and Anya's interference in the alternative reality, Vampire Willow is killed the same way she had been originally in The Wish, and she's put back in the exact time and place she left. Xander later suggests that Willow would not handle having evil train any better than he did in The Replacement. This prompts Willow to state, "I handle it fine," referring to these events. Willow's line to Vampire Willow, "Does that mean we have to snuggle?" It's yet another foreshadowing of Willow coming out in New Moon Rising. Oh. Alright. And last but not least, let's take a look at some pop culture references. Buffy claims one of the tests she and Faith had to do under the Council's instructions was the Rorschach test, a data psychological test in which patients' interpretations of ink blots are analyzed. Buffy says that Faith will never be on the cover of Sanity Fair, a reference to the magazine Vanity Fair. Will thinks Oz finds it boring for thinking she would rather forego his gig than miss school. Oz calls that a radical interpretation of the text, which is a reference to philosophers Donald Davidson and W.V.O. Quine. So overall, I think this episode is kind of interesting, and yeah, seeing Vampire Willow again was pretty cool, so yeah. So overall, I give Doppelgängland 3 vampire steaks out of 5. Well, anyway, tune in as we take a look at the next episode, Enemies. So, until then, here endeth the lesson.